Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission here is always the same. We take a stack of compelling source material and we give you what you need to be quickly, deeply, and surprisingly well-informed. Today, we're doing a deep dive into some material that's, well, it's both challenging and, I think, crucial, especially for anyone focused on global finance, on urban planning, or even just climate risk. We're looking at key excerpts from After the Storm Tells the Truth, Land, Power, and the Real Cost of Climate in Jamaica. It was published by Jamaica Homes right after the devastation from Hurricane Melissa. And what's interesting is how it treats the hurricane. It's not just a weather event, it's a moment of reckoning, a moment when all the polite language and the politics around infrastructure stress just sort of disappeared.
That's the key context. I mean, for you, the listener, this isn't just an island story.
Right.
This is an investigation into how global warming stops being a scientific projection and starts being a direct, quantifiable financial problem. It's about seeing where climate change actually shows up on a balance sheet right now.
Okay, so let's unpack this and maybe start with Hurricane Melissa itself. The sources, they make it really clear this was something fundamentally different.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the storms Jamaica has historically, managed. The damage wasn't just about routine repairs. It was, and this is a quote from the source, a loss of the old comfort that Jamaica could rebuild forever.
Precisely. And that's a psychological shift, but it's one that's rooted in a physical reality. I mean, if your infrastructure is designed for, let's say, a Category 3 storm once a decade,
Right.
and suddenly you get hit with an unprecedented Cat 4 or 5 that just explodes in intensity in a few hours, your entire system it's operating outside of its design. It's guaranteed to fail.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
The source gives us the climate mechanism behind it.
Yeah.
So why was Melissa so destructive?
Yeah, the why.
It's because the seas that were feeding it were hotter than normal. They provided this abnormal reservoir of energy. So the storm got stronger, faster, and it lasted longer than anything the existing infrastructure, the roads, the drainage, the buildings, was ever designed to handle.
And that's where climate change stops being a headline and starts being what the source calls infrastructure stress.
Infrastructure stress.
Think of it this way. The whole built environment of Jamaica was basically 20th century technology, and it was trying to run 21st century software. The moment you stress that system with that much heat, that much wind, it doesn't just slow down, it crashes. The whole thing.
So what does a crash like that look like on the ground? I mean, are we just talking about the cost of replacing windows and drywall? Or is it bigger? Is the source arguing the whole supply chain failed?
It's both. And that's what makes the financial blow so much worse. It's a systemic failure, so the repair costs, they're not linear. When the main roads buckle, you can't get repair materials delivered. Yeah. When the drainage systems get overwhelmed because the rainfall is double what they were built for, buildings flood that much faster. So the insurance math, the models that rely on averages, it just breaks.
Right, because nothing is average anymore.
Exactly. The actual cost of repair is inflated by scarcity, by logistics failures, by just the sheer volume of damage happening all at once. For the average homeowner, climate change shows up as this massive, immediate bill that the local economy just can't absorb.
And that failure, that systemic failure, it forces this harsh truth test on every single piece of real estate, which I think leads to one of the deepest themes in the material.
The idea that land never lies. It remembers everything.
That's such a powerful line. It connects the geology to the financial ledger. Yeah. So what exactly did the storm force the land to remember?
It remembered everything that was rushed, everything that was, a shortcut. The storm violently exposed which developments were built too close to the sea without proper setback, which ones were sitting on hillsides where the trees had all been cleared, and which drainage plans, only existed in a glossy developer brochure.
So the land just reverted.
It did what it was always going to do. Floodplains flooded, hillsides slid, the reclaimed coastlines. The sources say they reminded everyone that the sea never really forgets what belongs to it. The disaster just audited 2 decades of land use decisions, ruthlessly.
So if the land is enforcing this brutal honesty, that honesty flows straight into the ledger book. I mean, this has to be a fundamental shift in how we value property. Yeah. The old mantra of location, 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 it suddenly feels totally outdated.
It is.
The sources argued that the new reality, the new value, is defined by resilience, resilience, resilience. A resilient roof, engineered for this new climate, is suddenly worth more than a panoramic sea view. The whole risk calculation is flipped.
It's a literal feedback loop. Poor planning gets instantly penalized by nature, and then that penalty gets monetized by the market. Development ethics, They suddenly become a financial imperative.
So a developer who cut corners for a quick profit.
Melissa is the market corrector. It enforces the long-term price of that decision, and that price gets passed straight to the homeowner.
And we have to include this specific quote from Dean Jones of Jamaica Homes. It just, it nails this idea of accountability. He says, land doesn't argue with us, it responds to what we do. Every choice shows up eventually.
Yeah, it makes it personal. It's about human choices, not just random fate.
So the moment the debris starts to clear, the conversation shifts from physical damage to financial stability. And that leads to the really uncomfortable question, who pays?
And the financial sector answers that question very, very quickly and ruthlessly. See, when storms like Melissa stop being these rare, black swan events and they become common, annual variables.
A recurring cost.
A recurring cost, exactly. The losses they cause are no longer temporary hits to the balance sheet. They become permanent structural risks.
Okay, let's unpack the specific financial consequences the source lists out. It sounds like a predictable cascade of failure in the financial ecosystem.
It is. The consequences are immediate. You see insurance premiums just skyrocket, doubling or tripling in a year. Coverage shrinks. Key protections like flood or windstorm coverage, they become way too expensive or just unavailable in certain areas.
And for banks?
For banks, it's a massive collateral risk, so they tighten lending significantly.
How does that actually work for a potential homeowner? When you say banks tighten lending, what levers are they pulling? Is it just higher interest rates?
It's more than that. They mainly target the loan-to-value ratio, the LTV. If a bank thinks a property faces catastrophic risk, the collateral itself is unstable, so they might demand a much larger down payment, which reduces their exposure.
Or they might just refuse to lend at all.
Exactly. They might refuse to lend if you can't get adequate, affordable insurance, because without it, the asset is basically unrecoverable. And this leads to entire areas, often coastal areas, that, as the source puts it, quietly fall out of favor.
So for you, the listener, this is the critical takeaway. Climate risk is now an immediate, necessary financial variable. The storm creates this measurable gap between what a property is worth on paper.
Under the old assumptions?
Right, under old climate assumptions, and what it actually costs to keep it insured, mortgaged, and standing in this new reality.
The actuarial models have to face reality. If you can't insure the asset, the bank can't reliably hold the liability. It's that structural instability that's how climate change dismantles wealth. Not just by destroying buildings, but by breaking the financial tools that create wealth in the first place.
And if we connect that to the bigger picture, the conversation moves from just local property damage to global justice, to power dynamics.
It has to. Because the uncomfortable truth the source highlights is that Jamaica, like a lot of small nations, didn't create the global pollution that fueled Melissa's extra energy.
Yet they're the ones expected to just absorb the financial consequences over and over, rebuilding as if it's just bad luck. The source argues they're being asked to carry a global bill for climate change. What does that practically mean for a country like Jamaica?
It means devoting money that should go to development like hospitals, schools, renewable energy, and using it for immediate disaster repair. It means taking out huge foreign loans, often from places like the IMF, that come with serious austerity measures attached.
Cutting public spending, raising taxes.
It's slowing down your own economy just to service debt that you only have because of a climate event someone else caused. It's an economic straitjacket.
So is the source saying climate change creates these divides, or does the storm just act like a magnifying glass on inequalities that were already there?
It's a very powerful magnifying glass. The material is clear. The catastrophe immediately widens the socioeconomic divide in the property sector. Climate change just doesn't affect everyone equally.
And we should probably contextualize this term for the listener. When the sources talk about informal housing, what do they mean?
They're talking about communities, usually low income, where homes aren't built to code, where people often lack formal title to their land, and critically, where they don't have access to government infrastructure or insurance.
And they get hit the hardest.
The hardest. So the storm widens the gap between, say, coastal wealth that might have some insurance, even if it's expensive, and inland communities that have absolutely nothing to fall back on. Real estate is right at the center of that divide.
It shows who can afford resilience and who is left completely exposed.
And that's why that Dean Jones quote comes back with such force here. He says, if we only rebuild without demanding fairness, we teach the world that we're willing to pay forever.
It normalizes the imbalance.
It normalizes an imbalance where Smaller, exposed nations end up subsidizing the stability of the global system by just continuously absorbing the damage.
Now, this could all sound like a story of just pure doom. But the source material pivots pretty strongly. It argues that the disaster actually presents this moment of opportunity, a necessity to rebuild smarter, not just faster.
It's an opportunity born from necessity. The storm destroyed all the excuses. No one in government or the private sector can claim ignorance anymore about which parts of the island are vulnerable or which building standards are a joke. The data is written right there in the debris.
So the way forward, they argue, means a complete overhaul of their development philosophy. It demands specific, non-negotiable solutions. What are some of the core proposals they lay out?
Absolutely. So first, the immediate mandatory adoption of climate-ready construction standards. You have to engineer buildings for the next storm, not the last one.
That makes sense.
Second, making better and sometimes harder land use decisions. That might mean retreating from some coastlines, protecting natural buffers like mangroves. And third, they need financing models that actually reward resilience, maybe through subsidized insurance or better lending rates for certified climate-safe buildings.
That last point feels crucial. It's not just about engineering. It's about demanding that the financial systems themselves change. It requires the courage to say that this damage isn't just their burden to bear alone.
That's the framing. That's the final decision point the nation is facing. The future of property in Jamaica depends entirely on whether they accept rebuilding as a silent obligation, just clean up and wait for the next one,
Wow.
or if they reframe this as a moment to demand smarter development, fairer finance, and global responsibility. The storm has passed. The real focus now is on what society chooses to normalize in its wake.
It's such a powerful and immediate conclusion. I mean, for anyone interested in how the climate crisis is already showing up in finance and law, this is it. Hurricane Melissa didn't just change the landscape, it tested values. It tested the entire structure of real estate finance.
Right.
And the decisions made after the storm about building codes, about finance, about global fairness, those choices will define the country for generations.
And this situation forces all of us to zoom out a bit. Given that climate risk is now an essential financial variable impacting property everywhere, we have to ask a fundamental question. What existing property laws or international finance rules are implicitly forcing small, exposed nations to absorb the cost of global pollution through debt and austerity? And what legal mechanisms need to be created to finally achieve the fairness that the source material is so urgently demanding?
That is the complex, critical question to take with you. Keep exploring that intersection of climate, finance, and property law. That was the deep dive. We'll see you next time.